Last week, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm announced a new project to reduce the costs of long-term battery duration by 90%. So this is a big deal for electric utilities, power grids, and electric vehicles. And I'm going to talk to Dr. Kai-Philipp Kairies of German company ACCURE Battery Intelligence about it. So welcome to the interview, Kai-Philipp.
Hi, Mark.
Well, look, what are the implications of this? I mean, there was another initiative called Sunshot, where the launched in 2011, where the U.S. government goal was to reduce solar costs by 75%, and that was achieved. Not all due to the U.S. government, of course, but it certainly contributed. So, can this succeed, and what are the implications?
Well, it's certainly, I believe, a bold initiative. And as a storage system researcher, I absolutely support bringing more innovation into that field and also the money needed to reach that. I did a quick, back of the envelope calculation of where this 95% would lead us and what they're actually, starting from. My understanding is that we might be a little bit better already than they expect. So it might only be 80% to get to where we want to go, which is still a huge stretch. And yeah, we really need to look into all the available technologies that we have today to get even close to that.
Well, I understand that this is not, I said it was batteries, but in fact, it's long-term energy storage, which should include all kinds of technologies like batteries, so electrochemical, mechanical, carriers, hydro, pumped hydro, and so on. What are some of the technologies? Maybe you could explain them briefly.
Well, you actually already mentioned pumped hydro, and pumped hydro is a bit of an old technology that's not very hip anymore, and not in when people talk about energy storage today, they think about batteries, but in reality, like, pumped hydro makes up over 95% of the world's energy storage. So that's a huge deal, and we still have huge capacities around. But the challenge with pumped hydro is, on the one hand, it's almost impossible to build new ones, at least in countries like North America or regions like North America and in Europe, for environmental reasons. And also, the economics of them don't really pan out anymore. So even with pumped hydro, we have levelized costs of electricity in the 20-cent region. And like, the goal would be to go to 5. And with pumped hydro, there's nothing much you can do to get cheaper, because you always need to move land, you always need some pipes, some turbines. And these are things where we don't really expect any disruption coming our way.
So what about your area of expertise, which is electrochemical and batteries? What might we expect there?
Well, we've seen tremendous cost declines in lithium-ion batteries over the past decade. I mean, we started at values of more than 1,000 euros or dollars, almost doesn't make a difference in that regard, and going down to 1/10 of that, right? So today we are on cell level at costs of maybe $100 per kilowatt hour. So, a decrease by a factor of 10 already happened in a decade. And the next goal would be, what Tesla announced a couple of months ago, going down to $60 per kilowatt hour. So almost halving that again. And this is a decrease in price that has not been reached by any other storage technology. It has been reached by photovoltaics. So there's a very similar decline in price over mass production, from solar PV to lithium-ion batteries, but no other energy storage technology has reached even similar cuts in price.
Now, you had mentioned 5 cents a kilowatt hour as maybe being the target we need to reach. And if Tesla is correct, we're getting to $60 a megawatt hour, so that's 6 cents right there. So we're not actually that far. And I remember interviewing James Frith, who is the storage expert for Bloomberg NEF, and he thought that sometime in the 2030s, it would be $30 to $40 a megawatt hour. So now we're down to 3 to 4 cents. If you combine that with cheap solar at 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour, does that math make sense?
Yeah, we need to be careful in comparing these numbers in US dollars per kilowatt hour, because if we talk about installation costs, for example, or production costs of lithium-ion batteries, that would be $60 per kilowatt hour. That means how many US dollars do I have to spend to get a battery? And then we have the levelized cost of storage, which is how much does storing 1 kilowatt hour once cost me, right? So there's depending on how often you use that battery and how long it will last, you can basically calculate one number into the other. But I think like the general idea is with solar PV, we reached production costs, like levelized cost of electricity, of less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour already. And if we can get to 5-ish cents per kilowatt hour of storage, that would add to an electricity price comparable to what we have today, right? So then like the whole structure of electricity prices would be similar. But then again, it's a mixed calculation, because you don't need to store 100% of the electricity that we produce or use. So storage can be a little bit more expensive because we don't use it all the time. And especially long duration storage would be used for, long periods of wind, that is, of missing wind or of the sun's not shining. But, and that's the challenging thing, it would only be used once or twice in a year, right? So if you want to make money with that investment of a long duration storage system, you can only make that money twice in a year. So then the costs would be higher.
Why would it only be used once in a year as opposed to every day when the wind stops blowing and the sun isn't shining?
Oh, simply because short duration energy storage technologies usually have better efficiencies, and so they would make better use of that available electricity.
Okay, and so we should point out that usually long duration is considered about 10 hours, according to the Department of Energy. So that's what we're shooting for. And when do you think, what's a likely time frame for achieving these goals?
I believe like until 2030, which is less than 9 years away, it'll probably be a stretch to get there. And of course, it all depends. There's a lot of boundary conditions that you can play around with, of making sure we get to a certain number. But a reduction, for example, in production costs of the technologies needed for long duration storage by 90%, probably not. So there needs to be a lot of different factors playing together to even get close to the 90% that we're shooting for. But then again, what we've seen in the past decade with lithium-ion batteries is, if there's a market, the industry will follow, right? And if we have competition in the market, the prices can go down significantly. But in order to really push long duration energy storage, there would need to be a market mechanism to have a economic product, right? And today there isn't. In almost no country, we have a clear market mechanism of how you would make money with such a technology, even if it existed.
So is part of this program designing markets that can then be tested out? And I guess the US is the logical place to do that, because they have a lot of systems that are market based, as opposed to, say, Canada, which has only one in Alberta. So is the design of new markets that can be added to the existing market structure a key part of this initiative?
Oh, very clear, yes. Energy storage is relatively new in the grids. Yes, there have been pumped hydro storage systems, but they were always treated as their own class, and there were some rules and they worked, and no one really touched it ever again. But now that energy storage is becoming an integral part of our energy systems, we need to think about how, which role they should play and how we can compensate them for it. And at the moment, it's just not clear if you can make money with a long duration energy storage system. And so there are some ideas around on how you can incentivize market players to develop the right technologies and to deploy them also. But I believe, policy will be 50% of the whole package, needs to be.
Great. Kai-Philipp, thank you very much for this. Always appreciate your insights.
Thank you.